I'm Whitney Ward. Our top story tonight, the homeless camp near I-90 in Freya continues to grow, and so do the concerns among people who live nearby. Frustrated by the hundreds of tents and RVs that are now taking up an entire city block, now those concerns are spilling into Spokane's West Hills neighborhood. That is where Catholic Charities is moving forward with plans to buy the Quality Inn to house some of those campers. Neighbors and business owners along the Sunset Highway say they were caught off guard, and now they're pushing back. KREM 2's Kyle Simchuk is live outside tonight, outside of Spokane City Hall, where protests just started. Kyle.
Well, yeah, Whitney, these neighbors, they're really just trying to get the attention of Mayor Nadine Woodward and city council members who basically signed on for this plan for Catholic Charities to use state commerce funds to buy the Quality Inn. You can see this protest here behind me. It started about a half an hour ago. Some people holding up signs with question marks on them. They say there was absolutely no outreach and they had no opportunity to share their concerns with the city just about these plans for Catholic Charities to purchase the Quality Inn and house some of the people currently living at Camp Hope. Now take a look at this video. There's now a banner hanging over an overpass on Sunset Highway saying "No Camp Hope" on Sunset. We spoke to one woman who says she knows several people who are so upset about this plan that they've already listed their homes.
This is the biggest, most catastrophic news that has landed on us in the 30+ years I've lived in the same home here.
And if the plans move forward, the building could house approximately 100 people, but Catholic Charities says they wouldn't just let anyone in. Those people would have to be referred by other service providers and screened. They'd also have to follow a good neighbor agreement, and if they cause any disruptions or break any rules, like using drugs or alcohol, they can be kicked out of this building, which Catholic Charities says will be called the Catalyst Building. So again, back here live at City Hall, you can see more people coming here holding up signs saying no shelter clusters now, and some of these people, they do plan to testify at tonight's city council meeting. Live from City Hall, Kyle Simchuk, KREM 2 News.
All right, Kyle, thank you very much. And here's what we know right now about the Catholic Charities plan for the Quality Inn. It's being called the Catalyst Project, as Kyle just mentioned. Catholic Charities says it will open 60 days after it receives funding for renovations from the Department of Commerce. The supportive housing project would operate with a fully staffed security team that would patrol that site 24/7. Catholic Charities also says clinically trained substance abuse counselors and mental health providers will be working there on site. So we'll continue to track this story for you. Another top story tonight, Meade School Board taking on a controversial new proposal tonight that would make curriculum changes and limit certain books from school libraries. Board Director Michael Cannon is proposing changes to critical race theory studies and banning books that reference gender identity in elementary schools. He says America's history should be taught in school, but says how it's framed in reference to critical race theory could be reconsidered. He says critical race theory should be excluded from curriculum if the conversation stems from secondary texts. He says the idea is not to disregard history, but to set boundaries on what materials are used to expand on the subject.
No doubt there are times in history that we need to point to, and this is part of what we should be teaching in schools too. Let's talk about redlining. Let's talk about, these Jim Crow laws, these terrible parts of our history that definitely are racist. Those things are different than saying the institution itself is racist and it should be torn down, which is the critical race theory perspective, is that we can't address racism in an isolated manner when and where it exists, but we have to tear down the entire system.
Now, when addressing books that reference gender concepts, he says elementary schools are not the place to start those conversations. He says that's why books with those topics should be banned from those libraries. He says those types of conversations should be focused at home. Minority community leaders, though, are now responding to the policies. The president of Spokane Pride says the policies could exclude people from being able to identify with their neighbors, their own histories, and even themselves. Director Cannon says, though, it's not about exclusion, but keeping conversations age appropriate. And KREM 2's Janelle Finch is breaking down now how some community leaders are responding to these proposed changes.
Meade School Board Director Michael Cannon is presenting two policies at Monday's board meeting. Here are some of the statements Cannon is proposing should not be a part of classroom discussion. That one race or sex is superior to another, the United States is fundamentally racist or sexist, and individuals should feel guilt or psychological distress on account of their race or sex. Ahead of the school board meeting, Spokane NAACP President Keonta Duncan shared her thoughts on the proposed policies. In a Facebook Live Sunday, she says critical race theory isn't meant to make people feel bad about our country's history. She says students should understand it, learn from it, and see how it still applies today.
Talking about racism and race and critical race theory and all the pieces, we have got to swallow the truth. It's not meant to make anybody feel bad or feel like they're less than. That's not the point. The point is getting real honest about what really happened, what really happens, current tense, what's happening, present tense.
Cannon is also introducing a first reading on new restrictions in elementary school libraries. These restrictions could ban books about gender identity and gender-neutral concepts. Duncan also addressed this proposed change in her Facebook Live. She says taking away these books will not result in less students identifying as LGBTQ+, and it could impact how students address gender concerns in the future.
Do you want to have kids who are not talking to their parents, who are disconnected from their communities, who ultimately go on to do things that alleviate their pain because they could not be seen and respected in their bodies as themselves?
This is the first reading of these policies, meaning no action will be taken at Monday's meeting.
Once again, we'll keep tracking that story for you as well. In the meantime, the sentencing for the Freeman High School shooter continues today. Nearly 5 years ago, 15-year-old Caleb Sharp killed one classmate and seriously injured 3 freshman girls. He pleaded guilty to murder and assault in January of this year, and now his sentencing is expected to take about a week more for the court to hear expert and victim testimony. KREM 2's Amanda Rowley has followed this case since that shooting back in 2017. She is joining us now with the very latest from the courtroom today. Amanda?
Good evening, Whitney. Yeah, the only testimony we heard in court today came from the defense's expert, Dr. Craig Beaver. Now, he is a psychologist who has evaluated the school shooter since 2018. Now, he testified today that much more could have been done to prevent the school shooting, but the adults around and in Caleb's life failed him. Dr. Beaver described the shooter's home life as isolating, saying he would cocoon himself in his room for long periods and suffered from depression. The defense asked about a report the shooter's school counselor made prior to the shooting. Dr. Beaver said it had major red flags that concerned him, including the shooter would obsessively watch videos about Columbine. He also told the counselor there were guns in the house and he had access to them. Dr. Beaver says he doesn't understand why a safety plan wasn't more articulated with the shooter and his parents before his return to school, or why the counselor didn't follow up with parents about the gun safe.
Dad called the principal and said, yeah, he's doing great, he's going to come back to school, and they go fine. There was no formal assessment report or letter that was reviewed. There was no safety plan put into effect to monitor him closely when he was back at school to make sure everything was safe. A safety plan that included getting those guns out of there and locked up should have been number one the first time they met. Didn't happen.
The state suggested the shooter refused to say he needed help, but Dr. Beaver believes the shooter knew he needed help and sought it out indirectly by giving notes to his friends about his plans. He says that's because he knew they would report it. Now, tomorrow we are expecting the family of the shooter to read statements to the judge in court. Again, this sentence hearing is expected to last all week long and wrap up by this Friday. Reporting from the Spokane County Courthouse, Amanda Rowley, KREM 2 News.
All right, Amanda, thank you very much. In other top stories today, jury selection began in the trial of a former Spokane police officer accused of raping 2 women. In 2019, Nathan Nash was charged with 2nd and 3rd degree rape, as well as official misconduct. In 2021, he was charged with another rape and unlawful imprisonment. Last year, a Spokane County judge ruled those 2 cases would merge. Opening statements begin tomorrow. In Idaho, 4 more members of a hate group pleaded not guilty to conspiracy charges in a Kootenai County courtroom today. This comes more than 2 months after the group was arrested in the back of a U-Haul at a Coeur d'Alene Pride event. 14 of the 31 men arrested already have their trial dates scheduled. The first 2 trials are expected to begin September 19th. The crime is punishable by up to a year in jail, as well as a $5,000 fine and up to 2 years of probation. All right, let's switch gears. Let's talk weather, because later this week it is going to get hot, hot, hot once again. So meteorologist Michelle Boss is joining us now with a look at just how hot we're expected to get. First off, Michelle, do you think we're going to break any records?
It's going to be pretty close on a couple of days. And it's funny because you're talking about it's going to be getting hot. And we did hit 90 today, so that kind of gives you an idea of what type of temperatures we're talking about when we're not hot yet and it's 90. But we do have potentially record-breaking heat on the way for this week. And as we take a look at temperatures across the region right now, we're starting off our work week back in the 90s after seeing 80s over the weekend. Currently 90 in Spokane, just under 90 degrees in Deer Park and Coeur d'Alene, and lower 90s in Moses Lake, mid 90s in Grand Coulee and Lewiston. We do have heat advisories for the areas shaded in orange. This will go into effect. This is for Wednesday through Friday. And then that purplish color, an excessive heat warning from the Okanagan Valley down through the Moses Lake area, where we could see highs in the upper 90s to as warm as 105 degrees. This will be just a little bit less excessive than the heat wave we saw at the end of July. Currently, we have lots of sunshine out there, though. Not going to be seeing much in the way of clouds or any precipitation over the next several days. On the positive side, we have about an hour less daylight than we did back in late July for our last heat wave. So we're going to be able to cool off a little bit better with a little bit more nighttime. Temperatures getting down into the middle and upper 50s in most locations tonight and tomorrow morning. But here's a look at the temperature trend. Looks like temperatures will likely peak on Thursday. There's some question whether clouds on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday could knock a couple of degrees off our high temperatures, but whether it's upper 90s or low 100s, that is still going to be well above average. Clear skies expected tonight. Will be down into the upper 50s. And here's a look at the next 3 days. Mid 90s tomorrow, upper 90s on Wednesday, and around 100 degrees on Thursday.
At least it's cooling down at night, so we'll take it with that. Thanks very much, Michelle. All right, a new restaurant is introducing the Northwest to Native American comfort food. We'll have a look at the first fry bread restaurant, now open in Spokane, when we